Making headlines for this week of October 23rd, Harper be gone. Canada has a new leader, and he brings the winds of change, and hopefully a new day. Caught red-handed, long suspected, now proof appears to show direct Israeli influence and control over the Islamic State terror group. Risk of collapse. Sweden's social welfare faces possible shake-up in wake of citizen anger and too many refugees. And Back to the Future again. Toyota launches hydrogen cell car replica of the famed time-traveling DeLorean from the movie.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. The good news from Canada this week is that a leader who has been regarded by some as a dictator of the country for the last 10 years, with no remaining heart connection to the people of the country, has been defeated in the national election held on October 19th. The not-so-good news is that his party, despite being embroiled in scandals and crimes over the years, somehow managed to hang on to become the official opposition. The good news is that Harper has resigned as leader of the party that he shaped almost exclusively to his ideology and vision. The bad news is that he is still choosing to sit as an MP for the riding to which he was elected. What many Canadians seem to consider good news is that the Liberal Party, led by Justin Trudeau, and son of the late former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, won a convincing majority, partly from the hatred of Harper, but also the collapse of the New Democratic Party, led by Thomas Mulcair, that attempted a last-minute shift towards the right by embracing an economic policy towards austerity, something that turned Canadians off. Tom Hartman, writing in his column for Sputnik News on October 22nd, wrote that back in August, when current Prime Minister Harper first called for early elections, the Liberals were getting trounced in the polls by the historically much more left-wing New Democratic Party, or NDP. At that time, it really looked like the Liberals, Canada's so-called natural governing party, were on the cusp of losing yet another election. But then, something weird happened. As summer turned to fall, the NDP abandoned its progressive values and started moving to the right. The most obvious policy shift involved the budget. Even though everyone in Canada was sick and tired of the Conservative government's austerity policies, the NDP made balancing the budget, aka more austerity, a big part of its campaign platform. Meanwhile, as the NDP moved right, the historically centrist Liberals moved to the left. They started calling for more economic stimulus, higher taxes on the rich, and, you guessed it, legal marijuana. The strategy worked. The Liberals began to surge. By election night, according to the Elections Canada homepage, the Liberal Party received 184 seats, or 54.4% of the total. The Conservative Party, led by Harper, received 99 seats, or 29.3%. The New Democratic Party, 44 seats, or 13%. The Bloc Québécois, 10 seats, or 3%. And leader of the Green Party, Elizabeth May, retained the only Green Party seat. These results, however, do not adequately reflect how people voted across Canada. As has been mentioned previously, Canada has a system called the first-past-the-post system, a system that essentially cancels out all the votes in any political riding once a winner has been determined. It has been called a very dysfunctional system. It is the same system that is used in the UK. Had both Canada and the UK used a fairer system, one based on more proportional representation in their elections this year, the results would have been much different in both countries. In Canada, Dave Meslin and Mark Hargrove showed on a Facebook posting what the results could have been had Canada used a fairer system. They revealed that the Liberals would have had a minority government with 135 seats. The Conservative Party would have had 108, the NDP 64, the Green Party 10, and the Bloc Québécois 17. This would have forced a different style of alliance in Canada. In the UK, the UKIP and the Greens would also have done significantly better there had a more proportional system been used. As it turns out, Canada has a Liberal government. Among the statistics include a record amount of women, 88, and 10 members of various Onkweonwe, or First Nations tribes across Canada. The result was surprising and not expected, as Hartman wrote on one part of that moments ago. Andrew Coyne, writing for the National Post, reported that in only 4 elections in the past 80 years were governments in possession of a majority driven from office. For the Harper Conservatives to go down to defeat, then, of any kind, let alone defeat of the scale that seemed evident on election night, is remarkable. This is a government that had to do its level best to defeat itself, and let it be said, it has been up to that challenge. During the campaign and right from the start on election night, Trudeau has made great attempts to show that he is not Stephen Harper. The morning after the election, he went to a subway station in Montreal and greeted morning commuters to thank them. He immediately held a press conference in the Parliamentary Press Gallery, something that has not been done by Harper in over 7 years. The fact that he was even talking to reporters at all was a sign of change amongst journalists. On October 15th, just before the election, Trudeau scolded his own supporters for groaning over a journalist's question.
Defending Mr. Gagne's actions, saying essentially that he played by the rules. This morning...
Hey, we have respect for journalists in this country. They ask tough questions and they're supposed to. Okay? Sorry.
Before the election, Trudeau had promised on June 17th that he would scrap the first-past-the-post voting system. On June 22nd, he promised to increase funding for the arts and also for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, something that Harper was withdrawing funding for. On June 29th, he announced plans to end the fossil fuel subsidies and invest in clean technologies. On September 30th, he announced that he is promising $3 billion for home care and mental health support. My personal feeling on that is that if this money was put into cleaning up Canada overall and getting rid of the bankers and the commercial system of law, that things would get infinitely better overall instead of trying to put out a fire that won't get put out until after all the other issues are first addressed. It appeared that he was off to a good start from election night. In my personal opinion, however, he fell off the boat with these comments he made on October 13th.
I continue to deplore Russia's actions. Putin is being dangerous in his interventions in Eastern Europe. He's being irresponsible and harmful to peace with his interventions in the Middle East. And he's being unduly provocative with his actions in the Arctic. Canada needs to continue to stand strongly with the international community, pushing back against the bully that is Vladimir Putin. And if I have the opportunity in the coming months to meet with Vladimir Putin, I will tell him all this directly to his face. Because we need to ensure that Canada continues to stand strong.
It is my hope, however, that those comments were made purely for election posturing and not because he is speaking from informed knowledge about what is going on globally. It is my hope that Trudeau will know well that the U.S. and the global cabal are beginning to find themselves increasingly isolated on the global stage. As well, Trudeau appears to have aligned himself as being a strong supporter of Israel. I find it rather odd that so many leaders find it necessary to continuously make special mention of supporting Israel and not mentioning any other country that may need more support. Sputnik News, the London Guardian, and other international media reported that shortly after the election, Trudeau told U.S. President Obama that Canada would be withdrawing fighter jets from Syria and Iraq. Another Guardian article by Rupert Neate also highlighted that the win by Trudeau also marked a win for Canada's marijuana industry. A group claiming to be nonpartisan has set up a website, trudeaumeter.ca, a website dedicated to tracking all the promises that Trudeau has made and keeping score on which ones he has kept. Although the new leader will not be officially sworn in until November the 4th, the website already notes that at least one of his 171 promises is already in progress. The website breaks down all of the promises so they can be monitored by Canadians and any interested people. As the transition begins from Harper to Trudeau, the CBC reported on October 21st that the transition meeting between the two went well, although neither leader elaborated on the items that were discussed. So who is Justin Trudeau? Looking at some of the international headlines starting to appear, he may already be moving toward sex symbol status, having a similar energy and presence about him that characterized his father, Pierre Elliott. They likely do not know the deeper history. International listeners will not likely know this longer history that has now brought Trudeau to the global stage, along with his children and his wife, Sophie Gregoire. When Justin was a young boy, Pierre was a highly respected international leader, known for speaking his mind, as was his wife, Margaret, a first lady whose status was equal to and arguably larger than Jackie Kennedy or Angelina Jolie. A CBC article by Neil MacDonald wrote about Maggie Trudeau in the following way. The most arresting image of the election was made in its final moments as the Prime Minister-designate made his way to the podium. He stopped to embrace a beautiful older woman. In the shot, Margaret Trudeau cradles her son's cheeks and gazes into his eyes. After all these years, she still opens her face in public. Cameras be damned. And while it may have been a quirk of lighting, there seemed to be more in that photo than a mother's love and pride. Apprehension, perhaps. Her eldest son is, after all, heading back to 24 Sussex, the place she still calls the crown jewel of the federal penitentiary system. It is the place where, in Justin Trudeau's own words, his family was torn apart. MacDonald recounted how the press had made fun of her even though she did not have a malicious bone in her body. She was worthy of paparazzi status, and the media attempted to expose everything about her. The media was not sensitive to her bipolar condition, and MacDonald feels that the time has come to give Margaret Trudeau the respect that she deserves. Justin's wife, Sophie, bears some of that free spirit, more enlightened way of thinking that made Margaret both admired and reviled in her time. Back in 2013, the Globe and Mail had this to say about Sophie Gregoire. If there is a handbook for being a political wife, Sophie Gregoire has just torn it up. Maybe it helps to be married to Justin Trudeau, for whom the old rules don't apply, or to be on the receiving end of good advice from his nonconformist mother, Margaret. But in the midst of the Liberal leadership campaign, the 38-year-old mother of two is talking to a crowd of female school teachers in Ontario more like a New Age healer than a risk-averse political partner. Focus on your breath. The breath is the divine pulsation within, she says in the ballroom of a Toronto hotel. And then she begins chanting a precisely articulated Sanskrit invocation designed to help her audiences feel more blissful and aware about their often underappreciated profession. The article continues. Ms. Gregoire is a recently qualified yoga teacher, energetic supporter of women's issues, and public speaker who believes in sharing her knowledge with as much truth and authenticity as I can, she says. In the murkier world of party politics, especially at the higher levels to which her husband now aspires, these are not necessarily qualities to be honored, and that is what makes Sophie Gregoire deeply interesting. If Gregoire's spiritual practices can anchor positive energies for her husband, then perhaps Canada can take some very positive steps forward, although it remains my personal opinion that any actions, however good they may be, will end up costing too much until the root source of the global cabal influence in Canada is rooted out, and that Canadians are liberated from their fraudulent debts and from a commercial system of law. So how are things looking for Canada going forward? Many will say promising. Given the past failures of the Liberal Party in their terms of governance, I will hold my comment to cautiously optimistic. A point of interest that, to my knowledge, has never before occurred in Canadian politics is that the people of Canada are calling on Trudeau to cross party lines and appoint Green Party leader Elizabeth May as his environment minister and send her to the environmental conference in Paris in late November. The CBC reports that 3 petitions have been set up calling for this appointment, or, at the very least, to make her a special envoy so that she can represent Canada effectively on the international stage. As far as the supporters of the Conservative Party go, it seems that they are having some trouble accepting the Democratic results. A thinkpoll.ca article on October 21st is reporting that supporters of defeated Prime Minister Harper are calling for an independent Republic of Western Canada, covering Canada's western provinces after the Liberal Party swept to power in the general election. A movement may now begin that is reminiscent of the Quebec referenda in 1980 and 1995. The group has apparently adopted a blue-color version of the Canadian flag, upsetting some people. It remains to be seen how things will play out and whether a more enlightened vision for Canada will be brought forth through this Trudeau family. I want to believe that he will embrace many of the higher values. On top of cleaning up the banking and legal systems, one sign I am looking for from Trudeau will be the restoration of the Canadian Central Bank to its originally intended purpose, to provide interest-free loans to the government before it was hijacked by the global cabal in 1974 under the leadership of his father. For now, Canadians can celebrate at having been liberated at least from the Harper regime, and moving forward, we can anchor as many positive energies as possible to support the continued positive, open, authentic, and transparent change that appears to have been promised to Canadians at this time. In other geopolitical news, although Russia has been demonstrating that the U.S., Western, and Israeli interests have had a hand in the affairs of the Islamic State group, a surprising turn of events appears to have caught at least one culprit red-handed. Veterans Today and Global Research.ca both have reported on the capture of an Israeli general who has apparently been commanding the Islamic State in Iraq. According to Nahed al-Husseini of Veterans Today in the Syrian capital of Damascus, the Foreign Affairs High Representative at the USA Parliament and Secretary General of the European Department for Security and Information Ambassador, Dr. Hassim Bousaid, confirmed that Iraqi Popular Army captured an Israeli officer whose name is Yussi Elon Shahak, based on the intel provided by the U.S. International Parliament and European Department for Security and Information. The Global Research article, coming from the Fars news agency, writes that the relevant bodies are now interrogating the Israeli colonel to understand the reasons behind his fighting alongside the ISIL forces and the presence of other Zionist officers among ISIL terrorists. The Iraqi security forces said the captured colonel has already made shocking confessions. Several ISIL militants arrested in the last 1 year had already confessed that Israeli agents from Mossad and other Israeli espionage and intelligence bodies were present in the first wave of ISIL attacks on Iraq and capture of Mosul in summer of 2014, but no ranking Israeli agent had been arrested. Political and military experts told the FNA that the capture of the Israeli colonel will leave a grave impact on Iraq's war strategy, including partnership with Israeli allies. In related news, Tom Parfit of the London Express reported on October 15th that Islamic State, or ISIS, is on the verge of defeat after Russia cut off its arms supplies, according to reports. On October the 10th, Jim Dean, in an article for the New Eastern Outlook, reported on how the U.S. and NATO had begun their disinformation terror war. Dean writes that It has been quite a show watching panic set in the Pentagon, White House, and NATO as the modest Russian air campaign began tearing up the terrorist infrastructure in northern Syria. 40% is claimed to have been destroyed in the first week in preparation for a Syrian ground offensive, which has now started. As Russia has fully complied with all international legalities, which the Western coalition has ignored, it left the West with only more lies and deceptions to protect its terror brigades inside of Syria. The anti-Russian media campaign is failing due to the sloppiness of the instant claims of civilian airstrikes, casualties, and this, mind you, by the people who have brought us almost 250,000 dead in Syria alone in their quest for regime change there. According to Dean, his gut feeling is that the new counter-terror coalition of Syria, Russia, Iraq, Iran, and China feels the time is right that the world will support it for challenging the phony U.S. coalition, which only wants to have its former, unchallenged control over its regime change terror forces with no competitors. If the Islamic State agreed to serve U.S. interests tomorrow, the U.S. response would be, "What piece of Syria would you like?" 5 days later, on the 15th, F. William Engdahl, writing for the New Eastern Outlook, notes that Putin is defeating more than ISIS in Syria. He writes that Russia and its president, Putin, a little more than a year ago in July of 2014, were the focus of attention in Europe and North America, accused, without a shred of forensic evidence, of shooting down an unarmed civilian Malaysian airliner over eastern Ukraine. The Russians were deemed out to restore the Soviet Union with their agreement to the popular referendum of Crimean citizens to annex into the Russian Federation and not Ukraine. Western sanctions were being thrown at Russia by both Washington and the EU. People spoke of a new Cold War. Today, the picture is changing, and profoundly. It is Washington that is now on the defensive, exposed for the criminal actions it has been doing in Syria and across the Middle East, including creating the recent asylum crisis in Germany and large parts of the EU. Engdahl comments on what he calls the remarkable restraint that Putin has shown in not reacting emotionally to the bait and traps made by Western leaders and media to try to give them ammunition for proving Russia as a guilty party. Engdahl summarizes how Russia and Putin are pointing out now how the emperor has no clothes, meaning that the U.S. and its partners are being fully exposed for what they have created and contributed to. The author closes the article by writing that now, with the truth in the open, exposed by the remarkable successes of a handful of Russian fighter jets in 4 days against ISIS, accomplishing more than the U.S. anti-ISIS coalition in over a year, it is clear to the world Washington has been playing a dirty double game. Now, the hypocritical Obama administration mask has been blown off with the precision hit of a Russian laser-guided missile. As German and other EU governments have admitted, much to the strong objection of Washington, Putin has demonstrated that Russia is the essential part of any peaceful resolution of the Syrian war. That, in turn, has a huge bearing on the current asylum seeker crisis in Germany and other parts of the EU. It also has a huge bearing on prospects for world peace. Engdahl had another article that appeared on Sputnik News on October 18th. In this article, Engdahl noted that after exposing Washington's dirty double game in the Middle East and smashing terrorists in Syria, Russia should go further, promoting independence from the Bretton Woods dollar order. In order to accomplish such a task, Moscow should push ahead the re-sovereignization of the Russian central bank as a state institution so that the Russian state is able to issue sovereign money without looking over its shoulder to what Wall Street and the U.S. hedge funds and their corrupt rating agencies think, the risk strategy consultant underscored. Together with the Eurasian Economic Union partner countries, with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization partner countries, with the BRICS partners and the emerging group of nations in the Middle East, Russia is likely to not only deal a blow to US-bred terrorists in Syria, but also to transform the foundations of world economic stability by understanding the true possibilities she has to end the tyranny of debt slavery by private Western banks and their central banks of the dollar system. The refugee crisis, as has been stated by several sources, has been created with an agenda. 2 articles this week, both appearing on the voltairenet.org website, look at different angles. The first article, on September the 7th, by Thierry Meyssan, exposes what he calls the phony crisis. He writes about the suspicious photo of the boy on the beach, asking why the body is perpendicular to the beach, when he claims that bodies normally washing up on a beach would come parallel to the waves. He notes that Qatar has been printing Syrian passports and giving them out. He notes also the costs involved for transport of refugees over to Europe and wonders who is paying for it all. He writes that contrary to the information presently being published by the media, less than a third of these are refugees from war zones. 20% are Syrians, 7% are Afghans, 3% are Iraqis. The other 2/3 do not come from countries at war. They are, for the most part, economic migrants. In other words, the migration phenomenon is only marginally linked to the Arab Spring and war. These are poor people who leave their countries to try their luck in the rich countries by virtue of the post-colonial order and globalization. The second article, by Pyotr Iskenderov, has focused on the refugees as being used as pawns on a chessboard, being moved by some external player or handler. As humans, we can help when we can, but we must also never stop questioning what is going on that is causing the crises in the first place. Although, ultimately, global peace can only begin within each individual who chooses it, it is one's own choices and actions that model the co-creation of the world that one is claiming to want. Last week, I used the analogy of a boil on the skin to describe the condition affecting our planet right now. I said that the boil had begun to break, and we are now seeing the mess of all the toxins that have been a part of our human society. What we are not yet seeing, however, is the core of this boil, the group of people, the companies and institutions that have been behind the debt, the fear, the separation, the enslavement, and the destruction of our planet for profit, power, and control. That core is being exposed more and more with each passing week. Like a doctor who is able to see through the blood and the mess and focus on fixing the injury, so too are there people around the world who are able to see through all the toxic mess currently unfolding, and they know who and what are responsible for it, and they are able to approach it from a calmer, more collected and balanced approach, whereas others are merely falling into fear. Case in point, a few countries in Europe are experiencing a backlash to the consequences of this immigration crisis. Forgive me for continuing to emphasize this, but it is important for new listeners, but also so that no one can accuse me of saying something I did not say. This issue is extremely sensitive, and in some ways it is a no-win issue. It is polarizing people, and it is bringing out the worst and also the best in humanity. This issue and others related to it are playing out for the purposes of releasing negative energies within the collective consciousness, and it is also contributing to the rising of human consciousness as we move above the negativity. Everyone is approaching the issue from his or her own uniquely different, equally beautiful space of awareness, and each is dealing with whatever issues remain in him or her, and this applies even to those who are claiming to view this issue from an enlightened perspective. There are those who firmly and strongly support the immigration because they are interpreting a crisis, and that there is a responsibility to help people. This is absolutely beautiful, and perfectly correct. These people may be missing that the crisis was manufactured to create disharmony, and this presents a challenge to the awakening mind and heart. There are those who are against immigration or who are burning down buildings made for refugees, such as in Sweden and Germany, and they are accused of being racist. Although in cases this may be true, and of course this is not a life-honoring perspective, this immigration crisis appears to have been started because politics and money is trying to control and divide humanity for the purposes of retaining their power and control. Politicians and others in control will not resolve the issue in Syria or other countries and rebuild those societies. The crisis in Syria has been going on for 4 years. Why is this issue becoming a media spectacle only now? Why is ISIS claiming that they are smuggling in their fighters to Western countries so that they can target alleged U.S. and Western attacks against them? Russia has been showing that the U.S. has not been attacking ISIS, but have instead been funding them. What is the reason, therefore, to smuggle ISIS fighters into Europe? Israel is now being revealed as having a high-ranking commander within ISIS ranks. Why? The same happened in Ukraine's Maidan revolution, where Western agents were seen to be shooting people on both sides to stir up a falsified conflict. Agents were smuggled into Ukraine to stir up trouble. The same appears to be happening in Europe, and the people must ask why. The battle is between human compassion and the need to stop the people and institutions that prey on that compassion to achieve their own agenda. RT has reported on at least 3 countries experiencing incidents of arson involving locations that were meant for refugees. An article from October 21st describes fires being set in Slovenia. On the 18th, there were at least 3 fires reported in Sweden, and other sources are now suggesting at least 8. Back in September, RT noted fires were being set in Germany. These actions are proving that the global cabal still is able to manipulate fears of people in various countries. They create a conflict and then let the emotions of the people take care of the rest. Last February, Hannah Roberts, writing for the London Express, reported that ISIS has threatened to flood Europe with 500,000 migrants from Libya in a psychological attack against the West. Transcripts of telephone intercepts published in Italy claim to provide evidence that ISIS is threatening to send 500,000 migrants simultaneously out to sea in hundreds of boats in a psychological weapon against Europe if there is military intervention against them in Libya. Many would be at risk of drowning, with rescue services unable to cope, but authorities fear that if numbers on this scale arrived, European cities would witness riots. As reported last week, Aaron Brown, in his London Express article from September 10th, noted that an operative working for Islamic State has revealed the terror group has successfully smuggled thousands of covert jihadists into Europe. The Syrian operative claimed more than 4,000 covert ISIS gunmen had been smuggled into Western nations, hidden amongst innocent refugees. There are now more than 4,000 covert ISIS gunmen ready across the European Union, this operative claimed. On October 6th, RT reported that Islamic State militants are planning to insert operatives into Western Europe disguised as refugees, claim U.S. intelligence sources, who unencrypted locked communications of the Caliphate's leadership. Disguised as refugees from Syria, Islamic State operatives will cross the border into Turkey. Then, using fake passports, they will travel further to European countries to conduct attacks. 2 important things to note here. The term ISIS has been dropped, and it is now being called the Islamic State, or IS. Could this be because the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service also uses ISIS as an acronym? Also note in the RT article that it is the U.S. intelligence sources making the claim or the warning that IS operatives are coming into Europe. And this should raise a few red flags, because the U.S. is arming the Islamic State. The U.S. is also losing control of its power in the region. NATO is also beginning to fracture, so there are numerous reasons for why the U.S. and Israel would need to create a crisis in Europe in order to scare people back into wanting and needing NATO protection. The RT article reported that Germany continues to be one of the main goals of IS. Why is this? Well, it is very likely because Germany has begun moving away from NATO and moving away from the euro currency, and is increasingly moving more towards the East to join in an alliance with Russia and China. Jack Davis, writing for westernjournalism.com on October 21st, noted a rather odd thing about a video of alleged refugees flooding into Europe. He reports on a recent video allegedly showing refugees flooding from Slovenia into Austria. In this endless column of people, he notes that one thing stood out that people seemingly have not noticed. The whole group consisted of adult males with no women or children. If we look at what is happening in Sweden, for example, as has been mentioned before on the newscast, Sweden has often been perceived as a success story, both in terms of its international reputation, its industries, and also its social assistance structures. Recently, U.S. presidential candidate Bernie Sanders has spoken of these socialist structures in Scandinavia as being something to aspire towards. There is a big problem that has not been acknowledged, however. The Scandinavian systems of socialism are merely another experiment in the enslavement of humanity. Although there are many good things about the socialist structure, the problems begin to arise when these structures are controlled and abused by those in power, while the taxes are paid for by the general populations that are being taken advantage of by the Swedish elites and politicians in their society. CVN reported several weeks ago on the October 2nd broadcast that a scandal was brewing in Sweden. On September 30th, an article in the Swedish newspaper Svenska Dagbladet, appearing on page 4, broke the story that more than one company connected to the Swedish Immigration Department has apparently been charging outrageous sums of money to house refugees. This has become a major cash cow for people who are already wealthy and owning numerous buildings or apartments around cities in Sweden. Building owners are now overlooking the long list of people who have been waiting for years to live in various cities and are instead receiving huge bonuses to rent their apartments to refugees. This has succeeded in doing several things. One, it makes the Swedish people angry because they are being denied apartments in the cities that they have waited years for, in some cases. Two, it makes the already wealthy landowners wealthier. 3, it fosters resentment and anger that refugees are being given high-class preferential treatment with the full support of the political class over average Sweden workers and families. 4, it means that refugees will be given jobs that Swedish nationals would normally receive higher salaries for because they will work for less, meaning more wealth for the elites. 5, it breaks down the middle working class, which the political elites feel have been gaining too much power. 6, as more refugees come in, the increasingly smaller tax base will have to pay for the loans that are being taken to house refugees and pay the wealthy landowners for housing them. Ingrid Carlqvist, a senior distinguished fellow for the Gatestone Institute, has written numerous articles on the issues impacting Sweden at this time, and has recently written an article suggesting that Sweden is on the verge of collapse. Carlqvist spoke to CVN and shared some of her insights.
It's not really just about the government we have now. We have a social democratic government now, but we used to have sort of a right-wing government, and they had absolutely the same policies about immigration that this government has. So what's going on here? Why does every government want as many refugees, immigrants as possible to Sweden? They all say they don't want it. They say that we must take them in because they are refugees and we are a humanitarian superpower. But on the other hand, they also tell people that this is good for Sweden because we need immigrants, because we have a lot of old people, so on. But that is absolutely not true, because we know that even immigrants get old. So that's a really stupid argument. So what is really going on? I think there might be two different purposes. The last government, the so-called right-wing, they're not really right-wing, but let's call them right-wing. I think that they actually don't want the welfare state. They had a plan to fool people that they were sort of also social democrats, and they want the welfare state to stay as it is. But they knew that if they bring in a lot of people with no skills, that can't read and write, and no feeling for Sweden, I mean, the reason why the welfare state and the big taxes, the high taxes, work so good in Sweden is because we used to be a homogeneous country. Everybody knew that if I work and pay my tax, one day when I get sick or when I get old, I will get money from the state. So most of the Swedes were perfectly all right with this system. But when you bring a lot of people into it that don't feel any solidarity with Sweden or with the Swedes, they just see a great system where you don't have to work. You can get money without working. So that's when the welfare state starts to crumble. It will eventually fall. And the right wing don't want the welfare state. So I think that their plan was to fill the country with so many people as possible that are not Swedish, not working, not paying taxes, and then the whole thing will come crashing down. So the Social Democrats, they really want the welfare state. But they also found out that, like in the 70s, people started not voting for the Social Democrats so much anymore, because then the Social Democrats had sort of fulfilled their mission. Everybody was okay, everybody was middle class, so to speak, so they started to vote for the right-wing parties. So the Social Democrats decided, I think, to fill the country with a lot of people that had no skills and no education, because they will vote to the left. So you see, they all want the same thing, but they believe in different outcomes. So what is happening now? Now we see so many refugees that we've never seen before. I mean, the politicians always tell us, we've always had immigration to Sweden. This is nothing new, la la la. But it is very new. It's unique because there are so many coming now. They even talk about this year, 200,000 refugees as people seeking asylum. And let's say that 90% of them get asylum, and then they will bring 3 or 4 relatives. So we're talking so many people. And before 2006, we had approximately 25,000 asylum seekers per year. So this is totally different. So what is going on now? Now we see people burning down these refugee shelters, not with people inside. They are the ones that they say will become shelters. I think that the politicians, they have been fooled by the fact that Swedish people are docile. We believe in the state. We think that everybody wants to do good things for us. But that kind of people, they don't protest until it comes to the point where they get crazy. This is not science. This is just my way of thinking, that if you push a very docile people far enough, they will not start with a little protest. They will go ballistic. And I think that is what is happening now. That is what we see in Sweden. And we will see a lot more of it, because you have a lot of people that have realized it doesn't matter what they say to the politician. It doesn't matter if they write emails to the prime minister. Nobody's listening to them. They're all saying, we can do this. This is good for us. And you just have to say, welcome refugees. And when you go on saying that to people, someday they will explode. I am afraid.
There may be some who will think I am anti-immigration, which I am not. Had there been a natural disaster of some kind, then absolutely help must be given. In situations like these, however, when a crisis has been manufactured with the intent of creating chaos, fear, and internal conflict, then the people must begin to ask questions. As Carl Kvist noted, when a good thing is abused, it will collapse, and every ism that has risen up in global society has ultimately collapsed under the weight of its own corruption. It is perfectly honorable to be a humanitarian superpower and to help. When the lifeboat is filled, however, with more people than it can handle, it will capsize and risk drowning everyone. The spiritual challenge is to act with human compassion as much as possible, but also to put a stop to actions of those who are intentionally seeking to capitalize and profit on the human compassion at the risk of everyone except the elite and political classes. It is hoped that the people of Sweden will not go ballistic, as has been suggested by Carl Kvist, but rather that the awakening energies of global change will instead bring about the global changes that affect the governance of not only Sweden, but countries worldwide that thrive on creating conflict, but moving towards co-creating a better society that will make certain types of governance obsolete, for their power and their fear-based politics will no longer be needed. As Carolyn Kennedy is quoted as saying, "As much as we need a prosperous economy, we also need a prosperity of kindness and decency." Links to all articles, including the article by Carl Kvist in both Swedish and English, will be in the show summary for this story. In a few other quick news headlines from around the world, Euronews reported on October 23rd that Portugal's centre-right leader Pedro Passos Coelho was asked to form a new government by the country's president on Thursday, despite failing to win an outright majority in Portugal's national election on October the 4th. Nonetheless, President Aníbal Cavaco Silva believes Passos Coelho is better for Portugal than the alternative. Even if the government formed by winning the coalition might not fully assure the political stability the country needs, I consider much more serious the financial, economic, and social consequences of an inconsistent alternative suggested by other political parties, Cavaco Silva said in a televised speech. A story out of the UK by John Bingham, reporting for the London Telegraph, writes on October 16th that the criminal justice system is a vast waste of money, one of Britain's most senior police chiefs has claimed, as he insisted officers increasingly feel they are being required to punish the poor. Sir Peter Fahey, who is due to retire as Chief Constable of Greater Manchester later this month, said he had seen a worrying number of officers leaving the service disillusioned at the state of policing in Britain. He said police increasingly feel the public does not care, and that officers often feel sorry for criminals because they have had unhappy childhoods. In blaming the system currently created by poor governance, Fahey added that the danger is that you are giving people a poor upbringing and then punishing them for having a poor upbringing, he said. A lot of police officers see that and think, if I had had your upbringing, I'd be on your side of the counter in the police station. In financial news, in what might be interpreted as a hint of financial actions to come from China, an article on the larouchepac.com website on October 15th has reported that at a special session of the Political Bureau of the Communist Party on October the 12th, called to discuss the issue of global governance, President Xi Jinping called for a major reform of the system of global governance, reported Xinhua news agency on Tuesday. Reform is necessary in order for China to play a greater role in global governance, Xi said, and international organizations must reform in order to reflect the significance of emerging markets and developing countries. Reform is an irresistible trend, Xi said, and reform at the global level is about laying down rules for the international order and international mechanisms, as well as deciding in which direction the world will head. Xi said the rise of developing nations like China has brought about revolutionary changes to the world order, and that it was now necessary that the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, for example, should undertake reforms to fully reflect the needs and interests of emerging markets. It is not simply a case of competing for the high ground of economic development, but what roles and functions nations will play in the long-term systemic arrangement of the international order. Today, more than at any time before, countries need to negotiate, Xi said. Problems are not limited within borders, and challenges cannot be handled by any one country alone. Although there may be some who might interpret this as being a threat to Western hegemony, which it probably is, the article adds that Xi stressed resolutely safeguarding the international order and a system centered on the UN Charter principles, as well as safeguarding and consolidating the benefits that resulted from the victory in World War II. The purposes and principles of the UN Charter are not dated, Xi said, adding that the fact that they have not been effectively implemented is to blame for rivalries and injustices today. Xi spoke out against agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, calling for upholding an open world economic regime and against trade protectionism, which are key elements in both agreements. Xi urged efforts to build a community of common destiny and to promote global governance featuring mutual consultation, efforts, and sharing. In Iceland this week, this country has taken further actions against some of the bankers that were responsible for their financial crisis back in 2008. An article on the Raw Story website on October 21st reports that in stark contrast to the record low number of prosecutions of CEOs and high-level financial executives in the U.S., Iceland has just sentenced 26 bankers to a combined 74 years in prison. The majority of those convicted have been sentenced to prison terms of 2 to 5 years. The maximum penalty in Iceland for financial crimes is 6 years, although hearings are currently underway to consider extending the maximum beyond 6 years. The article continues, adding that the prosecutions are the result of Iceland's banksters manipulating the Icelandic financial markets after Iceland deregulated their finance sector in 2001. Eventually, an accumulation of foreign debt resulted in a meltdown of the entire banking sector in 2008. At the time when Iceland took action against the bankers and politicians, the European banks got angry that Iceland would allow its banks to go bankrupt. The EU threatened that this would destroy Iceland, but in fact, after a couple of years of hardship, Iceland began to come out of that hardship and in fact is now one of the countries best positioned for growth in the EU. Another article on IcelandMag.com on October 23rd writes that according to figures published yesterday by SA Business Iceland, the average disposable income in Iceland is the second highest in the Nordics. Only Norwegians enjoy a higher income than Icelanders. According to the calculations of SA, average incomes in Iceland are the 10th highest among the OECD countries. SA Business Iceland figures seem to contradict what the government is saying, although the article continues writing that the calculations released by SA show that when the most recent OECD data on average annual incomes is adjusted for purchasing parity, taking into consideration recent wage increases and the strengthening of the Icelandic currency, the krona, over the past few months, Icelanders have some of the very highest disposable incomes in the world. Disposable income is the money households have available after taxes and transfers have been taken into account. It seems that Iceland has been doing at least something right over the last few years, although the mainstream media has been reluctant to report on this fact. that this little country went head-to-head with the global banking cabal, and it appears that they have won. In disclosure-related news, it is perhaps not very often that a UFO sighting might be worthy of coverage by a news website such as International Business Times, but it seems a photo taken by a few boys in India appears to be generating some interest, at least on the Indonesian version of IB Times, and sources seem to believe that the photo has not been photoshopped. According to the IB Times article on October the 8th, a UFO sightings from around the world continue to stir up the debate on claims by conspiracy theorists on the existence of extraterrestrial life. And in what could spur the interest of UFO enthusiasts around the world, a huge see-through cloud-like round object was spotted in Manipur, India. Some boys from a students' hostel in Manipur's capital city, Imphal, saw a strange transparent circular object hovering over the neighborhood on October the 7th. The boy added that pictures of the mysterious see-through object were sent to him a day later. The article is careful to note that some sources may believe that the phenomenon is only a case of lenticular clouds because of their smooth, oval-shaped nature. An article on the in5d.com website addressing the same incident adds details of something that happened the next day, writing that one day later on October the 8th, skywatchers witnessed mysterious objects which flew through the sky over the Ganden Monastery in Lhasa, Tibet. It was also seen in Xinjiang and Tianjin provinces in China. Parts of the Himalayas are known for their UFO activity. The article adds that over the years, this area is known for its many mysterious UFO sightings and suspicious objects coming out of the inaccessible huge mountains and coming out of a lake named Aksoykin Hu. The article notes many people as claiming that there is significant UFO activity in this region and that there are underground and underwater bases. On another note, the article adds that it's interesting to know that only a few years ago, the Chinese discovered some Sanskrit documents in Lhasa, Tibet, and sent them to the University of Chandigarh to be translated. Dr. Ruth Reyna of the university said that the documents contain directions for building interstellar spaceships. Their method of propulsion, she said, was anti-gravitational and was based upon a system analogous to that of a lagima, the unknown power of the ego existing in man's physiological makeup, a centrifugal force strong enough to counteract all gravitational pull. Dr. Reyna said that on board these machines were called astras by the text. The ancient Indians could have sent a detachment of men onto any planet, according to the document, which is thought to be thousands of years old. The manuscripts were also said to reveal the secret of antima, the cap of invisibility, and garima, how to become as heavy as a mountain of lead. The Indian scientists, according to the article, were not seriously interested in the ancient scripts until the Chinese announced that they were including certain parts of the information for study in their own space program. If true, the article writes that this was one of the first instances of a government admitting to be researching anti-gravity. Although this is not necessarily proof beyond all reasonable doubt, it follows that one should use one's own discernment. It is believed that at least a few governments of the world have access to anti-gravitational transportation, and this does bear consideration when taking into account the whole picture regarding the issue of UFOs, ET civilizations, and advanced technologies. CVN has reported in the past information that has shown up showing that an aviation company in Canada, an old company called Avro Aviation, was in partnership with the U.S. military and had plans and documentation for its own version of anti-gravitational technology. In a separate but related story, however, John Austin, writing for the London Express on October 19th, wrote on one of what appears to be an increasing number of UFO incidences involving the International Space Station. Austin writes that a strange glowing orb that was accompanied by a nearby blue flash has been seen near the International Space Station, the ISS. Austin adds that it is the latest in a series of alleged UFO sightings near the ISS, which some alien researchers claim is being hounded by them, as reported by London Express last week. The UFOs are seen on almost a daily basis, according to alien hunters who keep spotting them on a NASA live camera. At between 25 and 20 seconds into the video, there is also a strange blue flash to its right. Scott C. Waring, editor of UFOsightingsdaily.com, said, "This UFO is very amazing and seems to appear out of nowhere." Skeptics argue the mere fact of anomalies does not automatically mean a UFO containing aliens has been filmed, pointing out that it could be a satellite, space debris, or a meteorite. The frequency of so-called UFOs on cameras of the ISS, which houses 6 astronauts, is increasing so much, according to the conspiracists, that some now speculate they may be evidence of secret tests being carried out by NASA. The latest is said to have been filmed on October the 1st and shows what is described as a glowing object moving towards the space station, but far below its orbit. Austin presents further possible evidence for consideration a week later in an October 20th article, showing photos allegedly coming from the Mars lander, depicting what appear to be hieroglyphs on rocks. According to Austin, in this article, NASA photographs taken by the Curiosity rover apparently show writing on a rock. Footage of NASA images taken by its Curiosity rover show the writing on the rock according to alien researchers and conspiracy theorists who are convinced it proves that there was once an ancient civilization on Mars, much like those on Earth. Skeptics claim that it is just different textures of the layers of the rock. All links will be in the show summary for your own review and discernment. A lot of mystery surrounds the oddity of the Earth satellite we refer to as the Moon. One of its biggest mysteries is how and why it seems to defy the laws of physics of all other celestial bodies and does not have any spin on its axis. It is always the same part of the Moon that is constantly facing the Earth. Speculation has been rampant about what exists on the dark side of the Moon. China has sent a probe to the dark side, and photos have suggested that there may be structures present on the surface of the Moon. Now, according to RT, on October 18th, Russia and Europe are planning a joint mission to the dark side of the Moon and then build a base there. If you were paying attention, you may perhaps be wondering why Europe is planning to work with Russia when Russia is allegedly the source of all the problems that have been affecting Europe lately, and why Russia would be working with countries that are imposing sanctions upon Russia. This is why it is so important to look to other stories to try to connect the dots about what is really happening on the geopolitical scene. It is highly unlikely a partnership like this would be announced if things were really as bad as Western media is reporting them as being. According to the article, the European Space Agency, the ESA, is set to join Russia's ambitious plan to colonize the Moon, with an announcement that it will provide key tech for a planned exploration mission in 2020 and possibly help construct a permanent outpost. Announced by Russia's space agency Roscosmos last November, Luna 27 is a robotic lander that will land in the South Pole Aitken Basin, a giant crater on the dark side of the Moon, and prospect it for resources that could be utilized by future Moon dwellers. To be fair, the article says that the ESA will not officially commit until 2016, but they are making plans to participate. Igor Mitrofanov, Roscosmos' lead scientist on the project, has called on the ESA to get involved. He is quoted as saying to the BBC that "We have to go to the Moon. The 21st century will be the century when it will be the permanent outpost of human civilization. Our country has to participate in this process, and we have to do it together with our international colleagues. Over to tech news now, and we start off with a bit of a follow-up on the announcement made last week by Miran Keshe of the Keshe Foundation regarding the release of free energy technology to various ambassadors of the world. The announcement seemed very big at the time, and it appears that the media of various countries that allegedly took one of the devices is not reporting on the technology. As to why this is the case, it is not yet known. Perhaps the media are being silenced, or perhaps they have not yet been informed of the technology, but since the presentation was streamed live to the world, this argument might not make sense. As I mentioned last week, I'm choosing to stay in a neutral, cautiously optimistic position until I can see what is playing out with this story. Keshe had indicated last week that he was giving the governments of the world 10 days to make this technology available to their own citizens. Very little appears to be going on at this time, with only 3 more days until the deadline approaches. At that time, Keshe had indicated that he is prepared to make all the plans available to the people of the world so that they can create their own energy devices and use it for their own needs, and this will put pressure on governments of the world to change. Perhaps by next week we may have a better idea of what is happening and whether the blueprints for the technologies will be released as promised by the Keshe Foundation. This past week brought the auspicious date of October 21st, 2015. As soon as I said this, there will be many of you who know exactly what I'm talking about, while others may be wondering what they may have missed. For those who are fans of the Back to the Future trilogy, it was in Part 2 that Marty and Doc set a date of October 21st, 2015 to travel to in the future. The movie presented a scenario of how life might be 30 years into the future. Looking now at what is now present, in some cases there are very close similarities. For those who may have missed it, Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd, who played Marty and the Doc, made an appearance on the Jimmy Kimmel Live show on October 21st in their most memorable roles as a tribute to the popular movie. A link to that appearance will be in the show summary. Toyota, however, has commemorated the date and the occasion by launching a special Back to the Future version of the famed DeLorean car that appeared in the movie. Mark Carter, writing for Inhabitat.com on October 21st, writes that Toyota just unveiled a Mirai hydrogen car that looks like Marty McFly and Doc Brown's time-traveling DeLorean. It even has gull wing doors, a flux capacitor, and a Mr. Fusion home energy reactor mounted on the trunk. Christopher Lloyd, who plays the Doc in the movie, was part of the vehicle launch, and he was quoted as saying that a piece of the future is now a reality with the Toyota Mirai. Compared to some other technologies predicted in the film, like rehydrated pizza or self-tying shoes, this technology has the real potential to change the world. The article continues. Just as Marty McFly and Doc Brown looked to the future, Toyota is also looking to the future with the Mirai's hydrogen fuel cell technology. This Back to the Future-inspired milestone has taken 30 years to arrive, and Toyota has been developing hydrogen fuel cell technology almost that long, said Bill Fay, Toyota Division Group Vice President and General Manager. There's no better way to generate excitement for a turning point in automotive history than with a film that celebrated the possibilities of the future. The car was introduced at a Back to the Future event in Los Angeles on October 21st and will also be shown in Las Vegas in November. According to the article, also at the event, Toyota officially delivered the keys to the first 300 Mirai owners. The response to the Mirai has been so positive that Toyota has already sold out of its first-year allotment of Mirais, with over 2,000 reservations already received. In a separate article on the car in July earlier this year, Carter wrote the following about the Mirai. In the market for zero-emissions vehicles that can travel almost as far as a regular gas-powered vehicle, up till now, your only choice has been the Tesla Model S with its 265-mile range. But Toyota just announced that the 2016 Mirai hydrogen fuel cell vehicle has a driving range of 312 miles or over 500 kilometers, which is longer than any other zero-emissions vehicle on the market. Of course, for the majority of listeners, it's not about cars that operate on roads that pollute our planet, but rather the cars that will fly and not require roads. In a late addition to this story, a link to an article by Elizabeth Anderson, writing for the London Telegraph on October 21st, will be included in the show summary, offering her tribute to Back to the Future Day and offering some of her previews of cutting-edge technologies that may be coming to a home near you in the near future. This next story will hopefully bring some hope and excitement to those who are unable to use their arms or legs, or if their use is limited. Although current technology is progressing to allow people to use their arms and legs again, a bit more time is still needed until it is perfected and mass-produced. RT, however, has reported on a coming breakthrough in this area. An article on October 23rd reports that in the first successful operation of its kind, doctors from an Ohio university used electronics on a paralyzed patient, enabling him to move an arm with just his thoughts by connecting an implant in his brain to electrodes placed inside the arm. Scientists at Case Western Reserve University were able to succeed in establishing a readable brain signal by using electrodes that can read thoughts being sent via the brain implant, allowing freedom of movement. The identity of the patient remained sealed under the privacy laws. This is the first time where signals from the brain have been correctly and successfully transferred to electrodes installed inside the arm of a patient. Although the movement is still not completely fluid, it is a big step forward in eventually offering a treatment for people having challenges in the use of their limbs. For now, for those unable to walk, a wheelchair is still needed to offer a degree of freedom and mobility for those who need it. Enter OGO, a new take on personal transportation. According to the homepage for this product, OGO Technology, the mission is to revolutionize the area of personal transportation and mobility. Our team has blended cutting-edge electronics and battery technology with an innovative, intuitive, hands-free control system to introduce a new era in personal transportation and freedom of movement for maximum independence. The following is a short YouTube video about the new technology.
Hi there, I'm Kevin, and this is the OGO. I have a good friend of mine, Marcus. He's been a paraplegic for many years. Although he's a very active and outgoing person, I still see him struggle with everyday activities that you and me take for granted. So I started working on a concept idea that I had, and after 4 years of development, with the help of Marcus, a Segway, and a couple of other people, I've ended up with this. Now the key feature to the OGO is the active moving seat control, which makes it very intuitive to use, completely hands-free, by simply leaning in the direction that you want to travel. But more importantly, you're using your core muscles all the time, even just to stay in balance. And that's something that's got the occupational therapist very excited. But more than that, by simply changing the wheels to a much larger all-terrain wheel, it becomes an off-road monster that'll go just about anywhere. And now Marcus can cruise down the beach at 20 kilometres an hour running over soft sand, and he can interact with his young family like never before. But not only that, he can now mow his own lawns. And you might think, who wants to mow their lawns? But if you ask any disabled, they'll tell you it's to feel useful. And that's a feeling that's very rare for some. The disabled are exactly the same as you and me. They all need freedom and excitement in their life. And OGO takes that to a whole new level. It'll go faster, it'll go more places, and is smaller and lighter than just about anything else. And the fact that you can operate it completely hands-free makes OGO a definite game changer.
The chair is currently in the pre-production setup, and the site indicates that they are expecting to be up and running shortly. For those with mobility challenges, the opportunities represented by technology of this nature might very well seem futuristic. Finally, in health news, a few stories that may offer some solutions to people who are looking for them. This first solution was posted on at least two websites, worldtruth.tv and wisediaries.com. The human body was never designed for the kind of living and stress that our current paradigm puts upon the body. The global cabal has known this, and the lifestyle most Westerners have become addicted to is also the kind of lifestyle that harms our bodies and shortens our life spans. The article writes that the modern world we live in today distracts us from having a good night's sleep as well. We are experiencing higher levels of stress caused by work, current events, family situations, and other factors that didn't affect past generations. Modern technology also interferes with our sleep cycles without us even realizing it. There are many sleep aids that we are advised to take, but they are artificial and may even cause addiction with some people. During the day, your body is working hard to keep up with you all day, and it requires the appropriate amount of time to recover, rest, and recharge for the upcoming day. Most of us think that we all get from not having a good night's sleep is the feeling of weariness in the morning. According to the article, the solution may be as simple as 2 ingredients. All you need are 5 teaspoons of organic raw honey and 1 teaspoon of pink Himalayan sea salt. The instructions are as follows. Mix these 2 ingredients together and store in a glass jar. You can make as much or as little as you want, but a 5-to-1 ratio works the best. Put a little bit of this mixture under your tongue every night before you go to sleep and let it dissolve naturally. As to why honey and Himalayan salt is used, the article notes that Himalayan sea salt contains more than 80 minerals and elements that are essential for our body for different processes, helping it to recover from the day. Honey contains glucose, which supplies our body cells with energy. This salt and honey combination increases the level of serotonin as well, helping us to relieve the stress naturally. I personally tried this last night, and I noticed that I did not wake up as often as I normally do during the night due to nerve inflammations on my hips, since I sleep on my side. I think I only woke up twice, so if this mixture contributed to that, I plan to continue trying it over the next week at least. This next possible solution, maybe for listeners, may help with cleansing the intestines and blood vessels in one's body. An article appearing on the sportonlinegroup.com website on October 10th writes that the body needs to be cleansed every 6 months, meaning twice a year, because the accumulated toxins can provoke various diseases. Frequent colds, infections, fatigue, drowsiness, lack of concentration are signs of the existence of toxins in the body, malignant bacteria, and other less harmful substances. The solution presented by the article involves using at least 2 ingredients, or a third for personal taste. This natural healing solution comes from Russian folk medicine and consists of kefir and buckwheat flour. The article writes that many called kefir the elixir of youth and health, and buckwheat flour has extraordinary healing effects. It strengthens the body, rejuvenates the blood vessels, reduces fatigue, increases blood circulation in the hands and feet, and enhances urination. This medicine is great for memory and concentration, especially for older people. Buckwheat flour lowers blood pressure, helps with atherosclerosis, and prevents constipation. Combined with kefir, it reduces blood sugar levels, cleans the bowels and blood vessels, normalizes metabolism and function of the pancreas, and increases the level of hemoglobin in the blood. To make the mixture, one needs the following ingredients: 1 tablespoon of buckwheat flour and 180 milliliters of kefir, and, if desired, a little honey. Pour the kefir and a tablespoon of buckwheat flour together and stir well. Leave the mixture in the refrigerator for a night. In the morning, stir the mixture once more and it is ready to be consumed. The mixture should be eaten instead of breakfast, and you can sweeten it with honey as desired. It is recommended to not eat anything for 3 hours after consuming the mixture, and the mixture is to be consumed for 14 straight days every 6 months. There may be some who are concerned by the term buckwheat flour as being a wheat product. At first, I was also. So in finding another article on celiacdisease.com website, buckwheat is not really wheat, and the bonus is that it is also gluten-free. The article by Nancy Lapid writes that despite its name, buckwheat is not wheat. It's gluten-free and it's safe for people with celiac disease. Buckwheat and wheat are from completely different botanical families. Buckwheat is high in protein and B vitamins and rich in phosphorus, potassium, iron, calcium, and lysine. A great source of dietary fiber, buckwheat helps lower cholesterol levels in the blood. The article with this information also includes a short video offering some suggestions for gluten-free grains that one may be interested in adding to one's diet. This final story may offer a possible holistic solution for some who are experiencing various forms of depression. Certainly, as many are experiencing various conditions and feelings resulting from energetic changes and shifts happening now, one of these symptoms may include periods of depression. An article on the openmind.com website on October 15th writes the following. Burning the resin of a boswellia tree as an incense has been a component in religious and cultural ceremony for millennia, for it is said that its aroma contributes to spiritual exaltation. Also known as frankincense and olibanum, boswellia resin has been mentioned in numerous ancient texts, including the Old Testament, for its mystical capabilities, and continues to have its place in some spiritual practices today. An international team of scientists, including researchers from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and Johns Hopkins University, set out to understand how this age-old practice produces these mysterious psychoactive effects. To observe the incense's psychoactive effects, the researchers administered incensol acetate, the primary constituent of the boswellia resin, to mice. The team found that the incensol acetate affects areas of the brain that aid in emotion regulation, specifically activating the protein TRPV3, a protein found within mammalian brains that is known to play a role in the skin's perception of warmth. This effect on the mind has a powerful antidepressant and anxiolytic effect that can leave one in an almost vulnerable state of relaxation, where one can lay their mind to rest and simply perceive. Frankincense has long had a ceremonial role in various religions. The article adds, however, that now frankincense is not just recognized for its ceremonial role, but as a practical form of therapy in treating bouts of anxiety and depression. As reported by the National Institutes of Health, the leading cause of disability in the U.S. for people aged 15 to 44 is major depressive disorder, which affects nearly 15 million Americans. Over 3 million are affected by dysthymic disorder, a less severe form of depression, and over 40 million reportedly suffer from severe anxiety, which is often associated with depression in and of itself. In the seemingly constant struggle for peace of mind, it is important that we are aware of all the natural methods of relaxation that the earth has bore for us. Additionally, the effects of frankincense have been found to be an effective remedy for nausea, fever, chest coughs, hypertension, as well as driving away mosquitoes and other harmful insects. As soon as I am able to get some frankincense, I'll give this possible solution a try as well. As always, there are never any firm guarantees that any natural solution will work for everyone, since each individual has uniquely different conditions. Therefore, one must do one's own research, but also try to learn to listen to the body and be guided to solutions that it wants you to offer. If these 3 solutions this week can offer a bit of comfort to at least a few people, then perhaps these stories have done their work for the week. All links will be found in the show summary for recipes, preparation, instructions, or for further review. In this week's final words, I think I've been talking too much this week, so I'm going to close this week's newscast with an inspirational video that I came across a few hours before airtime. A video that I think highlights what I, and I am certain many of you, have been feeling over the last days, months, or even years for some of us. We have been through the challenges of dealing with heartaches and rejections, as well as doubts, fears, and anger. It is part of the human experience. However, through it all, it is vital to be reminded of one's dream, reconnecting to that one truth that makes one's heart sing, and to hang on to that dream through the highs, the lows, the thick and thin of it all. The link to the video will appear in the show summary for the final words for this week. Create a wonderful week until our next moment of now. I leave you with this motivational video entitled Dream.
I don't know what that dream is that you have. I don't care how disappointing it might have been as you've been working toward that dream. That dream that you're holding in your mind, that it's possible. That some of you already know that it's hard. It's not easy. It's hard changing your life. That in the process of working on your dreams, you are going to incur a lot of disappointment, a lot of failure, a lot of pain. There are moments when you're going to doubt yourself and say, God, why is this happening to me? I'm just trying to take care of my children and my mother. I'm not trying to steal or rob from anybody. How did this have to happen to me? For those of you that have experienced some hardships, don't give up on your dream. Their rough times are going to come, but they have not come to stay. They have come to pass.
Greatness is not this wonderful, esoteric, elusive, God-like feature that only the special among us will ever taste. You know, it's something that truly exists in all of us.
It's very important for you to believe that you are the one. Most people, they raise a family, they earn a living, and then they die. They stop growing, they stop working on themselves, they stop stretching, they stop pushing themselves. That a lot of people like to complain, but they don't want to do anything about their situation. And most people don't work on their dreams. Why? One is because of fear. The fear of failure. What if things don't work out? And the fear of success. What if they do and I can't handle it? These are not risk takers.
You spend so much time with other people. You spend so much time trying to get people to like you. You know other people more than you know yourself. You studied them. You know about them. You want to hang out like them. You want to be just like them. And you know what? You've invested so much time in them, you don't know who you are. I challenge you to spend time by yourself.
It's necessary that you get the losers out of your life if you want to live your dream. But people who are running toward their dreams, life has a special kind of meaning.
When you become the right person, what you do is you start separating yourself from other people. You begin to have a certain uniqueness. As long as you're following other people, as long as you're being a copycat, you will never, ever be the best copycat in the world. But you will be the best you could be. I'm challenging you to define your value.
That everybody won't see it. That everybody won't join you. That everybody won't have the vision. It's necessary to know that you are an uncommon breed. It's necessary that you align yourself with people and attract people into your business who are hungry, people who are unstoppable and unreasonable, people who are refusing to leave life just as it is and who want more. The people that are living their dream of finding winners to attach themselves to. The people that are living their dreams are the people that know that if it's going to happen, it's up to them.
If you want to be more successful, if you want to have and do stuff you ain't never done before, number two, I'm asking you to invest in you. To invest in you.
someone's opinion of you does not have to become your reality. That you don't have to go through life being a victim. And even though you face disappointments, you have to know within yourself that I can do this. Even if no one else sees it for me, I must see it for myself.
This is what I believe, and I'm willing to die for it. Period.
No matter how bad it is, or how bad it gets, I'm going to make it.
I want to represent an idea. I want to represent possibilities.
And some of you right now, you want to be, you know what I'm saying, you want to go to the next level. I want to counsel, you know, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a doctor. Listen to me. You can't get to that level. You can't get to the level economically where you want to be until you start investing in your mind. You're not reading books. I'm challenging y'all to go to conferences. I dare you to invest time. I dare you to be alone. I dare you to spend an hour getting to know yourself. When you become who you are, when you become the person that you were created to be, designed to be who you were designed to be, when you become an individual, what you do is you take yourself and you start separating yourself from other people. I challenge you to get to a place where people don't like you, it don't even bother you no more. Why? Because you're not concerned with trying to make them happy, because you're trying to blow up. You're trying to get to the next level. I need you to invest in your mind. Invest in your mind. If you still talk about your dream, if you still talk about your goal, but you have not done anything, just take the first step.
That you can make your parents proud, you can make your school proud, you can touch millions of people's lives, and the world will never be the same again because you came this way. Don't let nobody steal your dream. After we face a rejection and a no, or we have a meeting and no one shows up, or somebody say, you can count on me, and they don't come through. What if we have that kind of attitude? The cause repossessed. Nobody believes in you. You've lost again and again and again. The lights are cut off, but you're still looking at your dream, reviewing it every day, and say to yourself, it's not over until I win. You can live your dream.
So that is a sample of the unfolding higher consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is broadcast weekly from the CosmicVisionNews.com website. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary, which is also on the website. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that conflict cannot survive without your participation. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosures unfolding all around you. Namaste.